G'day guys, this clip is taken from a 2 hour long interview with Sam from the Worldwide Warhammer podcast, where we talk all things WTC and Team Australia. If you'd like to see the full interview, check out the links in the description below, and with that being said, let's get into it.
Look for the Blood God.
So you alluded to this at Warmasters. So you traveled a couple of days early, had a grandiose time, and then you went to Warmasters. So, what was the idea for Team Australia attending the Warmasters? I know in the past, certain individuals you're allowed to play in the Warmasters, but then you had to have a list that was completely different for teams, or certain key elements which you could not represent. But I am of the belief that this was not the case for this year. Is that correct, Dean? And
that is correct. So, my philosophy this year was that we've got a bunch of people that have never played against Europeans before. And it can be quite jarring because you've got the language barrier to deal with. You've also got just differences in culture when it comes to the way that we approach the game, like for example, transparency on the way that you draw cards, the way you do scorings, the way you use the chess clock, like whose clock is like. There's just so many things that are just ever so slightly different that I thought that there would be tremendous value in as many of the people playing the Warmasters as we could. And everybody seemed to agree with that. So we actually had every single one of our players and coaches participate in the Warmasters. And then as for the lists, whether or not they run their list or a version of their list to hide any tech, I let that up to the players. I was like, if you want to play your team's list, I'm not going to stop you. If you want to play something that's like different, then I'm not going to stop you. I personally think that everybody should have just played their team's list, because the downside to that is obviously that other teams could come and scout. They could come and they could watch your games and be like, oh, that's what he does with this, and that's how he does that. But I think 10th edition it's not sophisticated enough for that to be really that big of an advantage. It's not like previous editions where you've got these weird combinations of units and stuff that it's like, what's he doing with that? Whereas like nobody's looking at a 10-man Scarab Occult Terminator unit that has a character with a relic that allows it to teleport and wondering what you're going to do with it, right? Everyone goes, oh, I wonder. He's probably going to deploy it and he's probably going to teleport with it. Like, it's not rocket science. So I think the downside is very, very minimal, whereas the upside is the amount of practice that you're going to get into, very likely, the exact lists that we're going to verse, piloted by the exact players. So, for example, Jeremy, I think it was his first round, he got paired into the Norway Tau player, who was the captain of Team Norway. So he actually got to play that specific game. And then he walked away with that with a complete new understanding of how that list worked. And he was able to bring that information to us. If he didn't participate in the Warmasters, we wouldn't have got that information. And yes, they got the information as well. Like, they got to play into our Thousand Suns player. But if we're not backing ourselves to be able to utilize that information to our advantage better than they're able to use the information to their advantage, well, then we're not really backing ourselves as a team. And my idea was that, part of what makes us a strong team is that we have that ability to rapidly analyze and adapt the strategy. And, if the other players have that, that's great. But I'm banking on the fact that they won't. And I'm banking on the fact that we have some of the fastest minds in the world that are going to be able to use that information really rapidly. So gathering that information is really important.
Oh, very cool. Very interesting. So, and you talked about there a little bit about scouting. So did you guys experience any instances of scouting from other teams or players?
Yeah, there was a few people hovering around me because my list is obviously probably one of the most esoteric lists, maybe even at the tournament entirely, but definitely one of the most, interesting ones on our lineup. And Australia obviously has a reputation for being a very strong team, and also has a reputation for running really out there lists. So there was definitely some people hovering. There were some opportunities where we could use this as a psyop as well. So when I noticed people were hovering around me, I would do things that I wouldn't do in the team's event so that they would see me do them, so that they would think, oh, that's what he's going to do. So there was one point where I noticed there was a few American coaches hovering around me. So I was just like, I'm going to take advance and charge this turn on my blood rolls, and I'm just going to send all the Terminators out into the open. It's like, I would never do that. That's not how the list was designed to function. But now they're sitting there going, oh, Dean plays it really aggressively. He just sends all his Terminators out and charges everything. So I was like, yep, cool. That's what I want you guys to think. You can go give that feedback to your team. And So it works out in our favor as well, as long as you manage it and you understand when you're being scouted and what information to present and what to withhold. But yeah, generally speaking, I don't think there was a massive amount of scouting because, like I said, the edition isn't sophisticated enough to justify it, in my opinion. Like, we didn't send our coaches out to scout. You know, we didn't say, "Oh, we want." Yeah, we didn't do it at all.
No, they're all too busy playing the Warmasters.
Yeah, well, that's true as well. We did have, like, the one thing about the Warmasters is we also had a policy of the second you want to drop out of it, drop out. You know, you want to be well rested going into the team's event. You want to make sure that you're not, you're already redlining before the actual event starts. So pretty much everybody in the team dropped out, after the third or fourth round. And then once that happened, they were then going around and sort of filling coaching roles and helping out and doing this, that, and whatever. And we could have used that as an opportunity to go and scout some lists. But yeah, like I said, I think most of the lists that we were preparing for, the ones in our pod, we had a really good understanding of what they were going to do. There wasn't any big surprises. So we didn't really want to, because the coach role, I think a lot of people underestimate how intense that coach role is. It's not just a come over to Europe and sort of hand water out to people. It's a very intense role. So I didn't want the coaches to be, redlining it all the way through and then have like a massive burnout before round 6. And then all of a sudden we go into the important end of the event with no coaching support. So, it was like, I could have sent them out to scout people and find information, but I'm like, nah, you guys have had fun at the Warmasters. Let's go back to the hotel. Let's do some laundry and let's kick back and, have some food and whatnot.
Hell yeah. Yeah, exactly. Do some more R&R.
Log for the Blood God.